Johannesburg. And this is the venue for the latest in the series of New Age business briefings. And just before the break, we heard from the Minister of Public Enterprises, Minister Malusi Gigaba. But joining us on stage, I'd like to introduce some key people that are going to be helping us with this conversation. And I'm going to start on the far right there. We have an economist, an advisor, an analyst, and a commentator on many economic issues. Iraj Abidian, Dr. Iraj Abidian, who's the CEO of Pan-African Investments and Research. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome. Somebody that I'm sure most of you will have seen a lot because he affects everybody's life, the CEO of Eskom, Brian Davis. Thank you very much indeed. And a lot of the people who travel to work, one form or another, will be affected by this man as well. Brian Malifa, the Group CEO at Transnet, thank you very much indeed and welcome. And once again, the Minister of Public Enterprises, Malusi Gigaba, thank you very much for joining us on the program. All right, okay, let's get into this discussion. Perhaps I can start with you, Minister. Because of the sake of time, let's just deal with the big issues straight away. You ended off by talking about SAA, and you're saying that corporate governance and financial issues that are of big concern there. Isn't corporate governance about appointing the right people? Is that where the failures have been then, perhaps?
Not really. There has been a particular instance where we've faced that, but the shareholder has been very decisive to try and resolve those issues. The issues of corporate governance at the present moment affect SAA as well as financial issues, and that is why we had spoken at length during the AGM last year, addressing the problems facing SAA. We continue to pay very close attention to the airline so that we can sort those ones out, sort the financial issues out, and improve on the operations. Because you heard from my presentation that the operations have been unaffected by these. The airline has continued to function well, but it can do better. If we have addressed long-term strategic issues.
You've lost money there, haven't you? So it's not doing well, really.
It has lost money, but it continues to improve. But those are historical problems. You know, they are not now problems. They are only relevant to the now, only to the extent that we have gone some way back with all of these problems. And the long-term strategy that we are busy developing is aimed at addressing these so that going forward, you can turn SAA into a viable airline that is able to meet its own financial obligations, address its own balance sheet issues, implement the fleet procurement program, but at the same time be able to fulfill government's social policy objectives.
Was Mr. Kona a mistake appointing him? Because I'm just thinking, you know, he left under a cloud, he sued you as an entity, and I'm just thinking, wasn't the relationship already problematic? So that in appointing him, perhaps might not have been the most judicious thing to do.
You know, Peter, when the SAPC appointed you to run this program, they didn't know. They didn't know that sometime in future you might, present a challenge. So me not being a sangom, yes. I wouldn't have known this.
Yes. That's very well. But on his CV was the fact that he did work at the SAA and left and litigated against the entity. So the relationship, as I was saying, between the SAA and him already had a history.
Those were then issues. We had looked at them and satisfied ourselves that those issues would not have a bearing. Remember that even the challenges we have faced now don't relate to that period. They relate to issues that have caused the board to have an irretrievably broken down relationship with him. And that is why I took this step. I don't believe for a moment that it was a mistake. I can't cast that judgment on him, it would be unfair, but I have acted to restore faith in the governance of SAA, let alone the issues that the board is investigating. They can investigate them, arrive at their own decision, whatever they want to do with them. I was acting in this instance because of the high public interest and concern about the airline. I was intervening speedily to resolve those issues so that the board can function smoothly and relate well with the executive.
All right, so we're going to, I'm sure, get some questions on that and explore that a little bit more. But Mr. Malifa, if I can turn to you, Transnet, you said very recently that, and we're talking about infrastructure rollout and so on and so forth, that you might have to cut your planned expenditure. Why is that? What are the concerns that you have?
Well, I was referring to the fact that in coming up with the 300 billion 7-year program, we have done stress testing. And stress testing means that we look at different scenarios and what might happen under different scenarios. And we went back as part of our risk mitigation, risk management, and said what would happen if the volumes that we are planning to have in the program, from which we will generate revenue that we need to have the 300 billion program, what would happen to the program. And there is a scenario that says that if the volumes do not materialize, we may have to cut back the program by about 50 billion. But the media, being what it is, then said, we are cutting the whole thing by 50 billion, which is not the case. I was referring to the fact that we have stress tested this, and there is risk management.
Okay, so there are no plans at this stage?
No, there are no plans to cut the program by 50 billion.
Okay, so now NERSA, everyone talks about NERSA and they associate Mr. Damas, but you've had to face them recently as well. You were looking for pipeline tariffs of about 22.6%. You only got 6.4% in the end. I think Brian Damas got a better result than you. And I'm just wondering, I mean, there's quite a big gap. What are the implications for you for not getting as much as you wanted?
Look, the implications are that we will not get, at least immediately, the revenue that we were anticipating from the pipeline in terms of the current determination. But that is not a problem, because the way that it works is that at the end of the year, if we can show that our capital expenditure is such that we should have got a higher increase, we can then get clawback from the regulator. So it's not a crisis, because, and given that our planning horizon is 7 years, so it's not a crisis, it's just 1 year. We did not agree on aspects of methodology with the regulator, and the regulator has pronounced 6.4. But at the end of the year, when we look at the numbers again, we may be able to claw back some of the revenue.
All right, so while we're still on NERSA, Brian Damas, disappointed in the result that you got?
We've put an application that is sound. We've done that from a perspective of what the country needs. This will question the fundamental part of what we can do going forward. And together with the board, we're looking at that, and obviously have to engage a shareholder as to what are the implications of the decision. But I can assure you that our application has been sound in the fact as to what the country needs. And there's some very difficult decisions and tough choices to be made as to how South Africa continue to invest in its electricity infrastructure.
What might that mean for consumers? And, you know, we're already worried about the 2008 blackouts and that kind of thing. Will we go down that road because you've applied your mind clearly and you didn't get the result that you wanted, and there are implications. And the guy at home just wants to know, what does it mean for me?
I mean, the immediate effect of that is a regulator's decision that will be implemented in terms of the tariffs. We have clearly indicated that the country needs to continue to invest in infrastructure. The minister has made this point. You know, what we're dealing with is 20 years of underinvestment and 20 years of how we've not maintained. We should never go through this again. But we haven't dealt with that yet, so that must be dealt with. We need to maintain an aging infrastructure fleet throughout the country, not only us, but many sectors. We need to fund this. This must be funded. It gets funded through bond markets, both locally and internationally. Funders need to have confidence in the ability of entities to raise money and to repay that. There are implications around how we deal with the rating agency's perspective around this. So really, the country needs to have a debate of how do all players play a role in this market, and how do we make sure we continue that investments. For now, the consumers will obviously see the effect of the tariff increases that the regulators allowed. In the future, we need to start debating our future energy options, how we will fund that, and how we're going to make sure we continue investing in that. All
right, so you can give us some reassurance that you're going to make a plan and that we're all going to be all right.
You have clearly indicated that we touch the lives of all South Africans.
Yes.
That's what we do. We keep this economy growing, and we certainly have the full intent to do that.
And we're going to keep the lights on.
But we need the support of everybody.
Okay.
Particularly this winter coming. I must be very clear. We need the support of all South Africans to make sure that we save energy where we can, and particularly at night. Without that, I can't give you that assurance.
All right.
If we all work together, then I can.
Okay, Dr. Iraj, one of the things that these guys do is talk a good talk, man. And I'm hoping that you can help me be the voice, another voice. And at the first one, I guess, the minister talked about the role of government in the economy and its right to participate. And I'm just wondering, do we sometimes cross the line? Does SAA need to be a public entity? Maybe ESCOM has an argument. What is your take on where the government should stop and start? Because this, again, was some of the issues that have come through from our Twitters, you know, leave business. The government should do the business of services, not the business of business. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very important point. The Minister, and I fully agree that the government has a role in the economy. But at the same time, there are limitations to what the government can do. For example, if the government takes on the task of energy for the country, it hasn't got the balance sheet. We've got to rethink the policy. Yes, government's got a critical role, but we must also define where the role of the government stops and where the policy should be so configured that we bring resources in order to secure energy on a reliable basis. If we keep saying that government is in charge of all the logistics, water, energy, irrespective, well, government will go broke. At the expense of who? At the expense of no money for education, no money for health, no money for basic services, no money for the pensioners. So there's a trade-off here. And we need to be very careful not to swing from neoliberal to state capitalism, that the state is in charge and without the state nothing can move. It is a balance that at the moment we haven't got it right. Yes, we balance ideological shift, but on the ground, the balance sheet of ESCOM is not structured properly. The balance sheet of Transnet is still safe, but if you want to do what Transnet should be doing for this economy, it wouldn't have the right balance sheet. Why? Because the capitalization is not right, and we bashing ESCOM, but ESCOM, quite frankly, is not the problem. The problem is our energy policy is not right, and that's the issue.
Minister?
The good thing is that we agree. Well, I don't agree with that viewer.
Yeah.
I think this debate in South Africa was defeated decades ago. Even at the advent of our democracy, we were clear that the state had a big role to play in the economy. This is a policy choice that the ruling party has made, and that government, therefore, is following. Now, having said that, I'm happy that we agree with Dr. Iraj that the government has a role. I don't agree with where he thinks the government role has to end. I think the state still has to do more. If you look at the levels of inequality in the country, if you look at the levels of poverty, you still need a government, not a nanny state that does everything, but a government that is bold enough and is active enough in the economy to address the needs of the people. The people in rural areas, the people in townships and informal settlements are complaining that they haven't felt the economic benefits, the benefits of this economy. We say the economy has been growing since 1996 or 8, that it grew sustainably over 10 years. But those people say, we haven't felt this. Unemployment is still high. Our children are still unemployed. They have no skills. So the challenge for our country is, yes, to get the balance right, but to also make sure that the state plays its part, the private sector plays its part in a way that benefits people, in a way that creates small business, that supports the emergence of new industrialists.
All right. Iraj says that you're going to go broke, though, if you carry on going like this.
Well, that again is a debate. It's a debate because how does it help us to have more money and more poverty? We need to strike the balance to increase public expenditure in a whole range of areas, not only social but economic as well. Because what we did, especially from 1996 and so on, you had a decrease in economic expenditure and a continuous gradual increase in social expenditure, because even as we implemented GEAR, we didn't cut the social grants, we didn't stop building new houses, we didn't stop supplying water and so on. But it helped us to stabilize the macroeconomic fundamentals to a point where you could begin to implement microeconomic reform so that you increase your economic expenditure and now get more boldly involved in building the economy so that you can develop the revenue to build more schools. The trade-off between the two is always important, but we must never say that it's important to have more money to build schools even if the economy remains as imperfect and racialized as it is.
All right, okay. Points to ponder. I'm sure Raj has got a defense for that. But we're going to need to take a quick break first, and then when we come back, we'll start taking questions from the floor and from you at home as well.